This meeting is being recorded.
Good evening and welcome to this orientation session for Greater Milwaukee Synod Assembly 2023. My name is Paul Erickson. I'm the Bishop of the Greater Milwaukee Synod. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I'll be kind of leading this conversation as we go through some of the basic details for Synod Assembly. After this is done, there might be a little bit of a time in between, depending on how many questions that you might have, but there will be a budget hearing that starts at 7:30. And those, in case people have any questions or want to hear a little bit of an overview of the financial picture in the Greater Milwaukee Synod, we'll be joined for that conversation by our interim financial administrator, Pastor Karen Hall. I'm going to get started with prayer, and then we'll talk through what we need to talk through. So the Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Let us pray. Holy God, we give you thanks for this gathering tonight. We give you thanks for all of the folks who are here on this call and who will be joining us on Friday at the Italian Community Center. We thanks for all those folks who have been working to get ready for this event, both in the Synod office, but also at the ICC and other places, other venues that have been collaborating and working together to make sure that this comes off. We ask Almighty God that through all of the meetings and all of the emotions and all of the words and all of the activities, we might always stay grounded in why we do any of this. And that's so that we can organize ourselves, so that we can better understand and express and share the gracious love that we have through your Son, our Savior, Jesus Christ. Christ is the only reason we do any of this, so let's keep us grounded and keep us focused on that mission. In Jesus' name we pray.
Amen.
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 I've got a basic overview of things. We'll walk through a few things, but please, we got plenty of time. So if there's a question that comes up that I don't answer in the initial piece, please feel free to put it into the chat feature on Zoom, or we'll pause and you can raise your hand or just wave or just unmute yourself and start talking. We'll ask if you are not speaking at this point, just to keep yourself muted if possible, just so the background noise doesn't get too distracting, but we'll go ahead and get started then. Also want to call out a couple other people who may also be able to answer questions that we're gathering tonight. They're on this call. Dr. Joyce Caldwell is our Synod Vice President. So you can wave, Joyce, and we'll see who you are. There you are. Also on the call tonight is our Synod Parliamentarian, Matthew Brockmeyer. Matthew formerly served as our Synod Secretary. He's joined by his wife, Loretta. Good to see you. Good to see you both. And those are folks who can also answer some questions. But again, I'll give a basic overview of how things work in the Synod Assembly. And then we'll answer any questions that you might have. So just a few reminders of how this assembly will work. We are meeting, of course, at the Italian Community Center, downtown Milwaukee, right next to the Summerfest grounds. And if you were on a little earlier, you heard one of the participants asking about how is the parking going to be, because there is also Pride Fest taking place this weekend. That will be a little bit of a competition, but there are, we have many spots reserved at the Italian Community Center. They shifted ownership of the lots a little bit, so there's a new thing this year, and that is that you will have to register your license plate number when you get inside the ICC. There's a simple form and a simple way to do that. So just make sure that you either have your license plate number in your brain, or you take a picture with your phone or write it down on a piece of paper so you don't have to go running back out to your car. Like sometimes I can't quite remember what my license plate number is. So we'll begin registration at 1 o'clock on Friday afternoon. And we will begin the assembly with our opening thing at 2:15. So it gives you about an hour and 15 minutes to check in. Let's see. Also, I should also just make sure we did send out 2 emails with basic information. One was, I think, a little over a week ago, and the other one was just yesterday. So that email should have a lot of the basic information that you need. If anyone did not get that email, please call the Synod office tomorrow morning, and we'll find out what happened. So, and that a lot of this, again, is pointed you to the Synod Assembly website. I'll go there in just a few minutes, and you can kind of see how that all works. So once you're inside at the Italian Community Center on Friday afternoon, you'll find a registration area that you check in. You'll get a name badge, etc. And then you can go in and find a table to sit at in the grand ballroom, which is the larger of their two ballrooms. Get settled in. You will see on your name badge that it will have a number on your name badge, and that there's a lot of things on your name badge in addition to your name. It includes your congregation and your conference, which may come in handy. But we're also assigning tables for the Saturday morning plenary only. So you can ignore the table number that's on your name badge for Friday, but Saturday morning, we're trying to break people up a little bit so you're not always sitting with the people from your own congregation. We want to have some good conversations across congregations. So that's just for the Saturday morning section. So one of the things, how many of you have ever, let's see if I can change my screen so I can see everyone on the screen here. We've got 30 people. How many of you have been to an assembly before? A couple of folks have been to them before. Many of you are newbies. That's great. So glad you're here. If you've been to an assembly before in recent years, you will know that we have often used electronic voting. We are not using electronic voting this year. All right. A lot of reasons for that. One, it's expensive. Two, there's almost always some kind of a glitch in the technology. It's the Wi-Fi at the center or the machines themselves or something like that doesn't always work right. So we're doing old school voting, which will be by raising of hands. There might be some voice votes that take place. We have voting cards that we might use at some point. For the ballot, the actual election, if there is a contested ballot, meaning there's two people running for one position, we will be using a written ballot for that part. So all of those things are I think, going to make things hopefully go at least more predictably. They might take a little time, but we know how much time they'll take. So that means generally that you do not need to bring any kind of an electronic device with you. Certainly most people have a phone, certainly welcome to bring that. Hop on the Wi-Fi. There's a Wi-Fi code that you'll get when you get there. You may also choose to use another screen like a computer or an iPad or something like that to get access to the assembly booklet. Okay, that assembly booklet is the main thing that you will need for participating here in the assembly. There will be printed copies available, but we don't want to print. It's a 50-page document, book. So we don't print because a lot of people use electronics. So we've kind of guesstimated how many we think we'll need. We'll cross our fingers and hope that it's the right number. So we will have some printed copies available, but we also then encourage people, if possible, to look at it on an electronic screen. So how do you find the book? If you got that email, it was emailed out to everybody, but I'm just going to go ahead and show you where to find things. Hold on one second here. I got to change one setting on my computer so I can get to the right place. There we go. So hopefully you can see that's the landing page of the Greater Milwaukee Synod website. Okay, so you go to the menu bar here. You'll see, scroll down to events, and you will see Synod Assembly right here. Let me make sure I've got the right one. Yeah, Synod Assembly 2023. So you click on there, and if you go down, this will get tweaked a little bit every single day. So there were some changes made in it today. It might look a little bit differently if you've gone here before. Here's the parking instructions, for example. Here's how you download the assembly book, right in this star right here. It's also on this yellow tab. We've got it several different places. So if you click on this star, for example, you'll have the entire assembly book downloaded, okay? The table of contents are hyperlinked. So if you click on one of these, it'll just take you right to that page, okay? Or close to it, actually. It was supposed to go to page 17 and went to page 19. So this has all of the documents and everything that we'll need for the assembly, okay? So feel free to download it now, look it over. You'll see, I'm gonna scroll up a little bit, so close your eyes if this makes you dizzy. Just kind of walk through what's in there. The basic agenda is in here at the very beginning. Here's the agenda. And this is a idealized order of things. Things might get moved around a little bit based on how things go. But it then also has map of the ICC, committee listings, biographies of the various speakers. It also includes, I won't scroll all the way down because I think that's hard to follow on a screen, but it includes all of there's 5 resolutions that have been submitted. You can read those through in advance. All of the financial information is listed in here as well. We'll be talking through that at the 7:30 budget hearing as well. There's a little simple guide to Robert's Rules of Orders. I'll talk through a couple things in just a few minutes, but this will be the main thing that you'll need to participate. It's like your bulletin in worship. Everything you need is in there. That's what this is here. You pause there just to see if there's any questions so far. All right. So that's kind of the basics of how do you get in the room and know what you need to know. Let's just take a step back a little bit, if it's okay, and talk about why do we have assemblies in the first place, right? What's our main purpose in being here? Well, quite simply, I would say that we do it because this is what we do as church, right? Our ELCA is organized, as we say, in 3 expressions. We've got congregations, we've got synods, and we've got our church-wide organization. Each one of these expressions, we believe, is fully the church. So when we gather as synod, we do what churches do. We worship. We're going to worship on Friday evening at 7 o'clock. We study scripture and have conversations about our life and witness in the world. There'll be several devotion spots throughout the assembly. And then we'll conduct the business of the organization. This is our annual meeting of the synod. So just in your congregation, you have annual congregational meetings. Many of them happen in late January, early February. That's what we will do at this event as well. We have 3 plenary sessions or business sessions, Friday afternoon, Saturday morning, and then Saturday afternoon, right? So this is what we do as church, and we come together to do it because the word synod comes from a Greek word that simply means we're on the same road, right? We do this together. We all come together and make decisions together so that we can be church together for the sake of the world. So as for who it will be at the assembly, someone asked, how many people are coming? Well, we will be taking walk-in registrations. Can't guarantee that those folks will eat because we had to turn our numbers in for food prior to this. But the people who have registered thus far are 310 voting members and 42 non-voting participants will be with us for all or part of the event, right? You may notice that I didn't call you delegates. That's a word that is often used, but we generally use the term voting member because you're a full member of the assembly. You're not expected to turn around and call up your people back at your congregation and say, how should I vote on this? How should I vote on that? You're going to use your best judgment as a representative from your congregation. So you're a full voting member and can participate and speak and make motions and amendments and all those kinds of things. So our constitution requires that we have at least 60% of the voting members of this or any assembly be lay people. That means 40% or less have to be rostered ministers, that's pastors and deacons. Currently, our registration numbers show that we have 63% lay representation at this assembly. So we're in good shape on that note. So that's the why and the who of the assembly. Let's take a quick look at the what and the how. So what decisions are we going to make and how do we know how to vote? Well, I hope that you will take some time between tonight and Friday afternoon and Saturday to take a look at the materials posted on the website, look through the assembly booklet, do your homework a little bit if you like, so that you'll know what we're talking about during the assembly. And you'll see that there are several elections that are taking place. These are described on pages 21 and 22 of the assembly booklet. It's mostly for Synod Council and there are for our consultation committee. Now I can answer any questions that people might have about what work do those groups do, if that's something of interest to you, but there are still some openings for which we do not yet have nominations. So we will be working to get those from the floor of the assembly. And it also means that most of the positions, even if there is someone already nominated, most positions can also receive nominations from the floor. The exceptions to that are anything that comes from a conference, because the conference has to be the one who nominates. It can't come from the floor. And then the synod, the youth position on the synod council only can come from the council. It can't come from the floor of the assembly. Other than that, those positions would be open for additional nominations. The way that happens is that sometime between now and Friday night at 9 o'clock, you would go to the Synod Assembly webpage. There's a nomination section. Click on the nominations form. You can fill it out online and just click submit, and it will be in the queue. And then those names will be shared. So we're going to close the nominations at 9 p.m. on Friday, and then Saturday morning, we will take the first ballot. So there's plenty of time to get those names if you need to. So note that if you've been to previous assemblies, we're not going to be going to the microphone to take nominations from the floor. It'll simply be you submit this paperwork. If you're going to submit it for someone else, though, you've got to make sure you talk to them first, right? Don't put someone's name in if you haven't gotten their permission to do so. Let me pause there to see if anyone has questions about any of the open positions or anything like that. All right. Other thing that we'll be doing is taking a look at the synod budget for the coming year and kind of reviewing the finances of the synod. The budget, our budget year begins on February 1. So we're approving the budget that will start in 8 months from now on February 1 of 2024. And as I said before, there's a special budget hearing that'll take place 7:30 tonight. And so the budget is found in all of our financial information is found in the assembly book pages 23 to 32. All right. Third big piece of business that we will be conducting is resolutions and memorials. So if you have, if you've got your book handy or on your computer, something like that, or when you get your book, you can take a look. Page 14 is where that starts. We have a referencing council committee report. There are 5 resolutions that have been looked at and revised slightly from what was originally submitted. So the original versions of all of those resolutions are posted on the website, but we only printed in the book the revised versions, so as to not be too confusing about what it is we're talking about. So those 5 resolutions are in the book. They'll be shared as well, or they're also available online on the website. And we'll consider those on Friday afternoon. So you may recall that I said that we have one church in 3 expressions, church congregations, synod, churchwide. And each of these has an annual meeting, a council, and a staff. So in a congregation, as I said before, you have an annual congregational meeting, and the congregation council meets monthly, so they do the business in between those annual meetings. And then the pastor and perhaps other staff do the work on a day-to-day basis. Same thing in the synod, right? We have this annual assembly, which is all of us gathering at the Italian Community Center. We have the synod council, which will be electing half the membership of at this assembly to 4-year terms. So every other year, we elect half of the council. And they meet 6 times a year, 3rd Thursday of the month in the evening. Then we also have a synod staff, myself as bishop, and there are 8 other people who work in our synod office to do the work on a day-to-day basis. So in all of the 3 expressions of the church, the annual meeting is the highest power in the organization. So the synod assembly is the highest level of authority in the synod structure. And they can give direction to the council, the synod council, and to the synod staff. But you can understand that the direction probably has to be a little bit more general in nature because the synod assembly only meets once a year. So it can't get too into the details of how these things work. So an assembly, of course, then elects the bishop, as I was elected last year, to a second 6-year term, elects the council and the leaders, passes the budget, considers resolutions, etc. But you'll note that in those resolutions, the synod assembly cannot tell congregations what to do, right? The synod assembly cannot tell pastors what to do, and the synod assembly cannot tell the churchwide organization what to do, right? It can give guidance and suggestions. It can make requests of the churchwide assembly, for example. It can invite, encourage, inform, support pastors and congregations. But in terms of like mandating action, that this must happen, the assembly can only do that with the council, the Synod Council, and the Synod staff. So we work through all of the resolutions just to make sure that it's not mandating that every congregation has to do X, Y, or Z. That is beyond the scope. The annual congregational meeting of a congregation can make that decision for your congregation, but the Synod Assembly cannot dictate the behavior of a specific congregation. All right. So the resolutions that we have, that you'll take a look at, there's 5 of them, as I said, on the website and in the book. Those had to be submitted by March 31st so that we could make sure that they were in line, that they're in good form, they're in strong format, and that they're not contradicting any governing documents or guiding principles or rules of the church. It is possible, of course, that sometimes things happen after the deadline that someone or a congregation might believe we need to have a resolution about this because something just came up and we need to have a resolution about this. It is possible to submit resolutions from the floor for consideration at the assembly, but it has to be done by a suspension of the rules. And there's a way to do that. It's not hard. If you have any questions about how to do something, certainly Matthew Brockmeyer will be at the assembly and you can ask him, say, I want to do X, Y, or Z. How do I do this? Our job is not to prevent things from happening. It's to help you do what you want to do. His job is to kind of give me advice. I kind of oversee and manage the assembly. And our job is to make sure that the assembly can do what it wants to do. So if one of you or someone else has an important issue that you think needs to be addressed, you are able to draw up a resolution, and afterward, it'll come in after the other 5 that have been presented previously have been addressed. I certainly hope there will be time to do that, and you can go to the floor, and I'll explain how to do this if anyone really wants to do it. But you'd simply ask the assembly to suspend the rules for consideration of this specific resolution. The assembly agrees, saying, yep, that sounds like a good idea. Let's suspend the rules. It can then happen. Matthew, if I'm saying anything, I'm going to pause and make sure Matthew can jump in here, because sometimes I get a little informal with my Robert's Rules of Orders, and he always keeps me in line. Is that helpful?
You're doing great, Bishop Paul.
Okay.
Got it down.
All right. And again, and what we also do is if there is a resolution, we'll talk a little bit more about the voting and things like that. So let me just pause here a second, make sure I'm not missing anything. One of the other things that we do require, if someone's going to either make a new resolution or a motion from the floor or an amendment to a motion, to a resolution that's on the floor, we ask for all things to be submitted in writing. And there's an email address that we'll give you at the assembly. It's simply assembly@gmselca.org. That's where things can get submitted to make sure that we get it all right and we don't have to read someone's handwriting or something like that. It makes things go much more smoothly if those things are submitted in writing in advance. So, since this is such a large gathering, I know that there are folks, sometimes Robert's Rules gets some bad press because it can be really intimidating, right? If people feel like this is a foreign language, I don't know I'm just going to sit down and watch because I don't know what they're talking about, right? Then we haven't done our job, because we want to make sure that everyone who wants to speak has an opportunity to speak. Robert's Rules is how we do it, because we got over 300 voting members and we have a pretty short period of time in which to make these decisions, right? If it's a smaller group, you can take a lot more time and everyone can have a chance to speak. In a large group like this, if we let all 310 people speak on every single topic, it would be weeks long for the meeting and no one would stay, right? So we try to streamline it by doing these Robert's Rules, and I'm going to try to help folks participate. If they want to participate and want to speak, I'm going to try to help make that happen. So I'm going to explain just a little bit of an overview. Some of this might be very familiar if you're familiar with using Robert's Rules in other settings or at other church meetings or council meetings. But just to make sure that folks have a general overview of how this works, I'm also going to invite you, if you have already downloaded your booklet or when you do, to look to the back of the assembly booklet. We've got 3 pages of some basic guidance and summary of Robert's Rules of Order. There's a general overview of how all of this works to figure out what do I say and how do I say it. There's a list of kind of best practices, kind of coaching on page 47, and one of the pages, and then page 47 is a little chart that is a little more technical in nature to say, oh, exactly, if I want to do this, how do I do it? Is it what is it a majority vote? Is it 2/3 vote? Is it debatable? Those kinds of things are listed there. But simply put, when we go into the business portions of our meeting, passing the budget, conducting elections, considering resolutions, and so on, we're going to follow these rules. So when an item is presented and someone seconds it, that means they agree we should talk about it, we will say it is on the floor and open for debate. And we can only talk about that particular topic. Someone wants to ask a question about something else, I'm going to have to say, I'm sorry, that's out of order, because this is what we're talking about right now. So I'm going to, and then if people do want to speak to that, usually if there's a resolution, the person who is moving the resolution gets to be the first speaker to it. And then other people can line up at the microphone and wait to be called on. You have to be recognized. That's what we say by me. And I'll say, okay, microphone 1, would you please speak? So if I do that, if you're at the microphone, I will ask you to state your name. We encourage people to use their pronouns, your congregation, and then your reason for speaking. It's really helpful for people to understand what it is you're saying if you tell them right up front. Don't bury the lead. Say, for example, my name is Philip Melanchthon. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm from the Evangelical Lutheran Church, and I'm speaking against the motion. Then be okay. I know where this. If you want to make a motion to amend it, like say, I want to amend this to change this word or add this or subtract that, you also need to say that at the very, very beginning of your speech. My name is such and such, pronouns, congregation, and I'm here I'd like to make an amendment. And I'll say, okay, what is your amendment? You read it, and then I say, is there a second to that amendment? Someone else says, yeah, that's a good idea. Then you can speak to it. So don't make your speech first and there say, therefore, I move we change this. That's an out of order thing, right? So one of the rules one of the first things we'll be doing at the assembly is that we'll be adopting special rules. There's Robert's rules, and then we have some unique rules that we use here in the Greater Milwaukee Synod. And those are all also printed in the assembly booklet as well. One of the rules that we will be proposing that we've used recently that makes sense is that we limit all speeches from the floor to 3 minutes, right? Most people don't even need that amount of time, but we want to make sure that someone doesn't just dominate the microphone and do a filibuster on us. So it's a 3-minute limit to speak. We also, we have a proposed rule to limit debate on all motions to 3 people speaking in favor and 3 people speaking against, right? And that's on any motion. So if there's an amendment, that then resets the 3 and 3 rule, so people can speak for and against that. However, another rule that we are suggesting is that there be a 30-minute limit on any particular action. So on a single resolution, we can't just keep amending it ad infinitum. There's a 30-minute limit, and then we're going to call for a vote, right? Now, the assembly, any one of those rules, if we adopt the rules as presented on Friday afternoon, any one of those rules can be suspended by a vote of the assembly, saying, I think we need to talk more about this. I don't think we should end debate after this 3 and 3 or after 30 minutes. This is an important matter. We need more time. So someone can propose to suspend the rules to add 10 more minutes or 3 more people or something like that, right? Usually on most items of business, and this I can always be wrong, but oftentimes there's 1 or 2 people speaking in favor and against, and then we don't get to the 3 and 3 on both sides. So if no one is moving to a microphone, sometimes people want to run and call the question. That's fine, but you don't have to, because if no one's going to a microphone, I'll say, it looks like you're ready to vote. Are you all ready to vote, right? And if no one is moving to a microphone or jumps up and down, waves their hand and said, hold on, then they'll say, all right, let's go ahead and vote. And in most cases, we have a voting card that simply I'll say, all right, all those in favor, please raise your voting card. All those opposed, raise your voting card. Any abstentions, that kind of a thing, and we go on. All right. Any other questions about that part of it? One thing I did want to at least underline, and I'll do this again on Friday afternoon, is that since we're not using electronic voting devices, one of the things that we lose is the privacy of your ballot, right? Because if you're going to be raising your hand or raising your voting card when you vote on an issue, everyone sitting at your table sees how you vote. Some people find that they might find that a little intimidating particularly if they want to vote differently than the other people at their congregation or from their pastor. I would hope, however, that you might look at that as an opportunity for increased dialogue, and please feel free to vote how you believe, however you want to vote is important to vote. And if you disagree with your pastor or the person from your congregation or someone else, that's an opportunity to have a conversation about that issue. If there is, however, a particularly sensitive or divisive vote that is coming before folks, and they really would be inhibited, it is always possible to request that a vote be taken by written ballot. That is a acceptable motion within Robert's rules, and then we will be prepared to go ahead and do that. Obviously, it takes more time, so obviously hopefully we won't do that on every single ballot, but we will definitely and that is the ability of any voting member in the assembly can request that we go to a written ballot. All right. In addition to the 5 resolutions in the Synod budget, we'll also be voting on some updates to the Synod Constitution. You'll find those also in the assembly booklet. We'll be hearing some reports from the officers of the Synod, Synod Vice President, Synod Secretary, myself as Bishop, several of our ministries that we support, and then we have a representative from our ELCA churchwide organization, Pastor Kevin Jacobson. Also, we'll be getting an update on our Equipping the Saints mission appeal. We're working to raise $2.3 million for innovation, collaboration, and leadership. And Dr. Joyce Caldwell is serving as our campaign manager, and that she'll have a report on the work of that campaign on Friday afternoon. And the other thing that we will be doing at this assembly, which is different than in other years, we introduced again, well, we talked last night, there's another Zoom meeting. Some of you were on that, I know, that talked about the Authentic Diversity Audit. This is a 15-month process that we have contracted with an organization called Gold Enterprises. They began the work with some preliminary work last summer. We had a survey that was conducted last fall. In January, we heard a report on that survey at Together in Mission at the end of January. Then in the spring months, they've been doing some focus group conversations and one-on-one interviews, reviewing our documents and communications within the Greater Milwaukee Synod. And they will be giving, it's kind of a 2/3 of the way through report of the work that has been done, basically on how we can better live into our commitments to be an anti-racist and fully inclusive church. So there will be 3 hour-long segments of this assembly in which we will be hearing from Dr. Shauna Payne Gold and Dr. Lisa Ingerfield. There's an hour on Friday afternoon and then 2 hours on Saturday morning. So there'll be a chance to hear what they have learned about the Greater Milwaukee Synod. They have some guidance and some recommendations. And after each of those 3 times, there will be a chance for conversations around your tables. A lot of this can feel when you go to meetings like this, right? Sometimes it's just information overload and you're just getting stuff thrown at you all the time. We want to make sure that we break this up and you have a chance to process it and talk it over with the people who are sitting at your table. There was we did record last night's Zoom presentation, which largely was a recap of what was presented in January at Together in Mission. So if you're at Together in Mission in January, that's pretty much what was shared last night. There is the video, however, is already posted on the Synod Assembly webpage. There is also a web page for the Authentic Diversity Audit, which you can get at from our main page. And for example, all the slides that were shown at the January Together Mission event are also there. And a few other pieces of information about the audit itself, kind of the rationale, et cetera, et cetera. The slides, let me actually check to see. It was supposed to happen today and I lost track of it. I'm going to check to see if the slides for the audit, yes, they are. So if you were to go, I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen again, because this might be another piece of homework that you could do ahead of time. So this is on the same Assembly webpage where we downloaded the Assembly booklet here. If you just keep scrolling down, it says quick reference resources, right? So here is the Zoom presentation from last night, if you'd like to listen to that. And then here are the slides that will be presented on Friday afternoon and then Saturday morning, and then the two parts, part 1 and part 2 for Saturday. One of the things that some folks might experience is that sometimes slides have more information than really can be read well from a distance. And so these slides, if you have your own device and your own computer, that's is another reason why you may want to consider that, because then you can just click on here and you can see the actual slides themselves. And it might be a lot easier to read them when they're on your screen right in front of you. Okay. Let me pause there again to see if there's anything I left out. I'm going to look to Dr. Caldwell and Matthew Brockmeyer. Anything else that you'd like to add to the things that we've kind of highlighted thus far? Joyce?
I just add that I really appreciate and thank you for being present, for representing, or being part of our deliberations together, because that's who we are as Synod, and I look forward to your participation. And any questions, feel free to ask them.
Yeah. Anything from your perspective, Matthew?
Well, I'll reiterate the thanks for all of you coming and participating in the life of the Synod, in the life of larger church. The only thing I would add to what Bishop Paul said, but maybe it's also a reiteration, the rules are really meant to provide a fair and respectful opportunity for people to participate. And they aren't meant to make you feel stupid. They aren't meant to keep you from doing things. They are meant to facilitate conversation. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me too.
Thank you. There will be a lot of folks who will be ready, willing, and able to help at Synod Assembly. The Synod staff, of course, will all be there and can provide any support and guidance as we go through the event. There will also be some fun things to do and some other engaging things to do. We don't want to tell you everything. This is just the nuts and bolts of the event. Let's just see. This is pretty much what we had to present this evening. But what questions might you have, either about nuts and bolts or about things in a broader sense about life in the Greater Milwaukee Synod? Feel free to put something into the chat or just raise your hand and we'll chat.
Since I don't have my photograph on the screen, I'm going to address this. My name is Bruce from Mount Pleasant. And the question I have, this is an annual event, correct, Bishop?
Yes, that is.
And is it how many assemblies are there within the state of Wisconsin?
There are 6 ELCA synods that are in Wisconsin. One of them includes the Upper Peninsula of Michigan as well.
And do all 6 ever gather at one time in addition to this particular event?
No. We have the only other type of large gathering like this would be our church-wide assembly when it's from the entire nation, and then that's every 3 years.
Thank you.
There are some times when synods have done, and actually got a question from one of our neighboring bishops about whether we would ever want to do a concurrent assembly in the same location. This is not something that we've ever done before, at least to my knowledge. I do know of some synods where they would get together for worship and keynote speeches and stuff like that, and then they would break apart for their business meetings and then come back together for some increased fellowship and things like that. That has happened on occasion in a couple synods, but it's not common there. And of course, because there are 65 synods across the ELCA, and all of the synods meet usually from mid-April through mid-June. So there's about 9 weekends in which synod assemblies generally happen, maybe 10. So there's obviously going to be 5 to 10 synod assemblies every weekend, granting that most people skip Memorial Day weekend. So there's a half a dozen other synod assemblies taking place this particular weekend. I know, for example, the Central Southern Illinois Synod, that's the central and southern port of Illinois, they're having their assembly at the same time, and they're electing a new bishop. The current bishop is retiring. So yeah, these are happening all across the church. There are some synods, however, that have gone to an every other year format for their synod assembly. They only have a business meeting every other year. Most of them have some kind of a mission gathering if they're not having a synod assembly. And so it's an expensive venture, certainly. I'm grateful for the ways that congregations continue to send voting members, because when you're at a place like the Italian Community Center, the food is really good, but you pay for it, right? I mean, that's and the technology makes the meetings go very smoothly, but you got to pay for it. So that's one of the reasons why some synods have chosen to go to an alternate year format for their synod assembly. And sometimes if they have to do business in a given year because of synod assembly voting members have to be elected, and that's an every 3-year thing, so you might get out of cycle, they then sometimes are able to have a Zoom business meeting as a shorter synod assembly type thing. That's one of the things that has certainly come out of the pandemic. Almost all of our synods gathered on Zoom in 2021. As we did, we had a Zoom assembly that year. It was shorter, of course, but that is one of the things that we could do, have a business meeting on Zoom at other times of the year. Other comments or questions?
Have we ever gone to any actual congregations to host a function at a specific church? A larger church could accommodate it as well.
Yes, that has happened on occasion, and as we learned, it does not provide a significant amount of savings economically, because the largest expenses are for food and technology, and we still have to bring those in. There is some savings, and it's also many of our congregations are set up with pews, of course, as their largest meeting space. We'll be sitting around round tables that facilitates conversation and dialogue and things like that. It has happened, and it certainly could happen again if the Synod Council chose to go in that direction. So if you want to make that happen, run for Synod Council, get on the Synod Council.
Thank you.
Other questions we've got?
Bishop, with the UCC and the Episcopalian congregation, since we communion with them, are they partaking in any way at all?
Not this year. We have, in the past, we have sometimes had ecumenical guests and partners come with us, come to parts of the assembly, but we do not have any ecumenical visitors this year. But that has happened, and I'm sure it will happen again. Other things just to mention, highlights of the assembly, and I'm sure hopefully you've received the emails about this and seen the Synod announcements, various things happening at the assembly. So after there's a 2.5-hour business, or almost 3 hours business on Friday afternoon, 2:15 till 5 p.m. 5:30 is then when we will transition to a banquet. So there's a good half hour there'll be some display tables and some other things that you can kind of wander around. It's going to be a really nice day, so you can get outside and walk in the courtyard or walk around. 5:30 will be the banquet, and that meal will be served right at 5:30. And then there'll be a presentation by our keynote speaker. It's Pardeep Singh Kalika, and he is an activist that works in kind of cross-cultural understanding and understanding of why kind of works against hate crimes and violence that comes from religious bigotry and things of that nature. So he'll be speaking at 6 o'clock till about 6:30. Be another little break, and then we'll have worship at 7 o'clock. And Pastor Kenneth Wheeler is our preacher at the opening worship. And Pastor Wheeler was an assistant to the bishop in the Greater Milwaukee Synod and served as an interim pastor in, I think, about 17 congregations across the Synod in much of the 90s and early 2000s. And then he served then as pastor at Cross Lutheran Church until his retirement. And he's written a recent book and will be here to talk about his experiences. It's a very challenging book about his experiences as an African-American pastor and leader growing up in a very white denomination. So that will be, I think, a powerful experience for us to have him be our keynote or be our preacher at our worship service on Friday evening. After that, there's a dessert reception, and then folks can check out whenever they need to. We're back at it again at 8:30 on Saturday morning. There is a breakfast that is served beginning at 7:30. And then we'll be done no later than 5 o'clock, depending on how things go. We may be done a little early if things don't take as long as we had budgeted for them to take. We'll see what happens. So, all right. Any other questions on this portion, the orientation portion? All right, then I'm going to pause on the record